Good afternoon. Welcome everybody, or should I say ciao, 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 because we're going to Italy again this week. Because you know what? We had so much fun doing all about the Veneto last week. We felt like we'd go continue with the Italy. It's an Italy theme for the next few weeks because if you haven't noticed or seen or signed up or bought your tickets or heard about, there is an amazing Northern Italian wine dinner happening here next week. Check it out. More on that to come. But as a way to kind of whet our appetites, as you will, and get a little bit more excited about this Northern Italian wine dinner we got coming up here, or they have coming up here at Second Glass, we thought we would do an all Northern Italian wine flight. Now, just so you know, these are all different wines from slightly different areas. I'll explain that difference here in a bit. But we're dabbling in all things Northern Italian, and we're having a little fun. So we're starting out in Alto Piemonte, so that's the alpine reaches of Piedmont, a little bit further north than the classic Barolo Barbaresco with Ioppa. This is their Vino Bianco Sangrato. Really lovely fresh white wine. Gonna travel back down to Piedmont proper, to the Verduno village and Barolo for a little Dolcetto di Alba from Fratelli Alessandria, and rounding it out with, why wouldn't we round it out with a little bit of Nebbiolo from Barbaresco, from the lovely, lovely humans at Baio, their Autinbej bottling. So let's get into it because, time is money. So again, sticking to Northern Italy here, and we're doing, next week, like I mentioned, there's a really amazing wine dinner happening. It's all Northern Italian. So maybe you would think for this week on the flight, we would do something different. But I personally think more the merrier, right? So let's get a little more into it. So these are all grapes or specific appellations within Northern Italy that are not being represented on the dinner. So this kind of works in conjunction with it. So like I said, this is Ioppa. This is their Vino Bianco. These guys are located in Alto Piemonte, specifically within the village of Gemme. That's Ghemme, not like give me or gimme, Gemme, and not like Gamme, which is also what it sounds like. And they're really known for their Nebbiolo production, also in this area in Alto Piemonte. Classically and most commonly, Nebbiolo is blended with a couple other varieties, primarily Croatina and Vespolina. And that really has to do with a couple things. It's a colder region, so Nebbiolo doesn't always ripen quite as much, and it gives a little more elegance. So the Croatina and Vespolina kind of come in as a blending agent just to add a little texture, a little pop of color, a little bit of vibrancy, a couple of things that maybe historically Nebbiolo didn't always showcase, at least not in the best years. And then there's, 100% Nebbiolo is certainly made here, but having a small percentage of these other native grape varieties is pretty classic. But then on the other side of that, there is a pretty good history of white wine production. And you find a little bit more of it further south, a little bit south of the Alto Piemonte, for these grape varieties. But this is their Vino Bianco. It is Erba Luce and Timarasso. So two, again, indigenous grape varieties. I know, you really love that Erba Luce that you drank last week from California, because that doesn't exist. But these are indigenous grape varieties to this region. They do really well here. Erba Luce historically has always been used, not always, but more commonly used for sparkling production. And then Timarasso really became famous from one winemaker, Walter Massa, who kind of saved it from extinction. And this kind of represents this really beautiful melding of these two grape varieties. Erba Luce, high acid, really bright and fresh. Timarasso, a little more textured, a little nutty. And when you put those two together, you get this very complex, very easy drinking, just pure, beautiful summertime wine, and just showcases everything that Northern Italy is about. In my mind, when it comes to white wines, Northern Italy always has this alpine, fresh, herbaceous character. And then you get this Timarasso, which always has, for me, kind of a nuttiness to it. You get a texture and complexity to the wine that is just, I use the word unusual because I don't think people are expecting it when they taste it. So hopefully you get a positive, unusual flavor characteristic. You're like, ooh, I like this. I want more of it in my life. On the nose, again, crisp, clean, citrus, a little bit of subtle, bright green, fresh green herbs. Yes, That's what I want. It's so like, again, the nose, mineral, bright and fresh, but then the palate, it has that crispness, but there's this beautiful like viscosity, like textural element that just kind of engulfs your palate, and you're just like, wow, I did not know this wine was going to be so softly textured and have so many different flavor profiles all the way across my palate. I need more of that in my life. So good. Again, that is the Ioppa, the Vino Bianco, what they call their San Grato. It is a 50-50 blend, Herbaluce and Timarasso. Yeah, go ahead and Google that. You can figure out what those are. All right, moving into the next wine. So we're going from Alto Piemonte, which, okay, put my hand above the camera. That's useful, Chris. Alto Piemonte up here. Kind of like Piedmont proper, where you find like Barolo and Barbaresco and the towns of Alba and things of that nature. So we're in Alto Piemonte first with the white wine. We're going to come down to the very tippy top of the Barolo commune, which is broken up into different villages. And we're going to go to Verduno, one of the smallest, but also one of the most beloved in the wine industry, if you will. Really known for making high-toned, aromatic, vibrant, more fresh styles of Nebbiolo. But they also have some really other cool grape varieties that are native to this area, particularly Verga, which is an excellent wine, one of my personal favorites. But like everywhere else in the Piedmont, they also do the classics, the Dolcettos, the Barbaras, and things of that nature. So this is Fratelli Alessandria Dolcetto di Alba. Dolcetto gets a bad rap. It really does. It's not fair. I don't like it. I want it to have a better rep and people to enjoy it as much as I do. And the big thing to remember here is like, this is what most winemakers and farmers, this is what they drink. They drink Dolcetto on a daily basis. Why? Because it's easier access. It's got good fruitiness to it. No, do not use the direct Italian translation to Little Sweet One. That has no representation to what Dolcetto actually is. Yes, the grapes themselves can be quite sweet, and birds do love to eat them, but the wine is not sweet. It is dry, it is delicious. I mean, look at this beautiful color. And the exact opposite to Nebbiolo, which is this big, tannic, aromatic, really structured wine that has very little color, that chemical anthocyanins, which is found in grape skins. Nebbiolo has very low amounts of, I could be wrong, but basically it makes a very lightly colored wine, even though the structure is really dense. Dolcetto is kind of the opposite. It has this beautiful purplish, ruby hue, little darker, kind of smoky, gamey fruits. Dolcetto is kind of like Pinot Noir meets Syrah in a way. It's got that savory, herbaceous, almost what's the word? Savory. Savory is the word. I'm not looking for another word. Savory is the word. Little pepperiness to it, but also showcasing darker, more purple, red berry notes. It is such a fun wine to drink. So good with so many different kinds of food. And it's a wine that I think more people should recognize as being really great at exactly what it's supposed to do, which is a great drinking wine. This is not, they can be, but as a whole, this is not a wine to sit down and methodically think about really in depth. This is a wine to crack a bottle, enjoy it with your friends, enjoy it with food, just have it on a beautiful afternoon, slightly chilled, and it does all the things you want it to do. Again, on the nose, you get a little bit of almost an anise licorice, more, not licorice, but more in the category of fresh fennel. Dark berries, a little bit of spice. Oh, wow. The palate is structured. There's good tannins there, good fruit. It's not necessarily a heavy wine, but it's also not I wouldn't call it a light wine. There's a lot of structure there. Really, really pretty. Almost like a fuller bodied, more savory Pinot Noir, at least on the palate right now. And it definitely is not the thing that people always say. They're like, oh, Dolcetto, it's a little sweet one, like I mentioned before, but it's really not sweet at all. This couldn't be further from that. It is dry and savory and so delicious. Super happy with this, as per usual. Why wouldn't I be happy with it? It's an amazing Italian wine. Again, that is Fratelli Alessandria, their Dolcetto di Alba. Really lovely stuff from the 2021 vintage. Worth noting, this producer has sort of reached almost cult status. They're really hard to get a hold of. And Celeste has been Celeste and William have been good proponents and good supporters of this wine, so they get a decent amount of it. So they've got it here, and we're pouring it for the week because that's how much we love everybody who comes in here. We want to share these amazing wines. All right, rounding out our tasting for this week and the flights, we're going to Barbaresco. So we were just in Verduno in the far north of Barolo, and we're going to head a little bit to the east and a little to the north over to the town of Barbaresco to visit the lovely, lovely ladies and family at Ca del Baio. So this is their Autinbej, which is their it's their entry-level Barbaresco. So just kind of like basic level, what the Italians would call normale. It's not a single vineyard. It's sourced from several different sites throughout Barbaresco, and it's meant to really represent Barbaresco as a whole. And you get that a lot in Barolo. Anywhere, really. Burgundy, all the things. Now, granted, like I said, this is really kind of meant to run in conjunction with next week's Northern Italian dinner. Did you guys buy tickets yet? You should have bought tickets. It's going to be super fun. Apparently, there's this guy going to be there. His name's Zach Kilson. I've met him once or twice. Guy's a star. It's going to be fun. I've actually met him several times. He's a great dude. I was kidding. That was sarcasm. You should get tickets. It's going to be a great time. The wines are amazing. But we wanted to pick things that ran in conjunction with that, but weren't the same thing. So you're going to get two experiences that really kind of like bridge across the entirety of Northern Italy. And here, obviously, we're going to talk Northern Italy. We're talking Nebbiolo. So there's going to be some Nebbiolo. There's a Barolo on the dinner next week. But why not, visit the other Nebbiolo, so to speak. There's several other, and go to Barbaresco. So as a whole, Barolo gets, I think, most of the attention. And partly that's because it's a much bigger region. Far more growers. It has a lot more prestige. And Barolo as a whole makes a little bit more intense and kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Constantly I'm always looking, I need like a thesaurus in front of me just to help me with words because I struggle with words apparently. A little bit like stronger in character, a little more bombastic. Not that they're big, dense wines, but they just they leave an impression, whereas Barbaresco, for whatever reason, sort of doesn't get that limelight. And to some extent, I'm okay with that because that means there's more of it available for me. But if I were to put them, up on a board and point out the differences, like obviously they're both 100% Nebbiolo. They both have that structure, that grace. Barbaresco, generally speaking, for me, is just a little more graceful and elegant. It tends to have a little more upfront approachability, whereas Barolo tends to need a little bit more time in the bottle because of the structure and everything else. But I always think of I guess it would be like comparing, different Burgundy villages, or comparing like Pinot Noir in California, like comparing Santa Barbara to like Russian River. Like they're both very good. They're both amazing. Santa Barbara to me always has like a sense of grace and elegance to it, whereas Russian River is a little bigger, a little fuller, a little richer. And that's kind of what Barbaresco and Barolo are. If we're going to dumb it down really simple. Again, look at that color. If you paid attention and you saw the Dolcetto, it's much more purpley in color. Nebbiolo, this is about as like dark and ruby as it gets. Very translucent, really pretty, slightly brickish on the rim. Loads of spice, florals, red fruits, but very subtle. It's more about that spice and floral characteristic. Oh, wow. Texture for days. This Dolcetto, I want to drink it and share it with friends. I want to drink this and share it with friends too, but Barbaresco, Barolo, I want to sip on it and I want to think about it because it has all of those things. And this is one that it doesn't need all of the attention in the world, but it's still Nebbiolo. It still demands a little attention and it deserves it because the wine is gorgeous. Wow. So good. So again, quick wrap up. This week, weekly wine flights here at Second Glass. The Ioppa Vino Bianco Sangrato Dolcetto from Fratelli Alessandria. And then rounding out this week's flight is the lovely Barbaresco Autinbej from Baio. And again, next week on April 11th, 6 p.m., Northern Italian wine dinner. You're going to have some wines from Lombardy. You're going to have Piedmont wines. You're going to have wine from Veneto. You have the ever wonderful privilege of being in the presence of the one and only Zach Kilson, who is just a legend. The man knows what he's talking about. Just come to listen to him. You don't even have to drink the wine. He'll just chat your ear off and share all kinds of information. You'll have the best time of your life. 5 courses. Get your tickets on secondglass.com. And I'll see you all next week for another amazing wine flight weekly Cellar chats. Can't wait. Be safe.